So yesterday we had the trade deadline and we had some good trades, some bad trades, and some trades that just left me scratching my head, and we're gonna talk about the trades I thought were the most interesting ones, so let's get right into it. And we'll start off with in my opinion, the biggest trade from the deadline, Jean-Gabriel Pageau to the Islanders. And I'm not a massive fan of this trade if I'm being honest. Yes, Pageau is a good player and will probably be good for the Islanders, but 3 draft picks, one of them being a first rounder, is a bit excessive to me. But the Senators get a really good deal here, and their draft picks ahead of this year's draft and next year is looking insane. 13 picks this year, 7 of them being in the first round in such a stacked draft is insane, and given how underwhelming the return the Senators got for Namestnikov, getting this for Pageau is great. For the Islanders, they immediately signed Pageau to a 6-year deal at $5 million, but I don't think he's the answer and the piece they need to win the cup. But he's a PK specialist and he's very good at PK, so there's that. But that first round pick is just too much for me, man, even though it's top 3 protected in the lottery. The Islanders were also close to getting a deal done for Parise, which would send Andrew Ladd the other way, but it never came to fruition. So the Pageau deal was the only deal they made yesterday, but if that Parise deal happened, that would have been pretty fun and pretty crazy, because it came out of nowhere, but it didn't happen unfortunately. Staying in New York, but with the Rangers, Chris Kreider, who was the #1 player on the board side of this deadline, was not traded. Instead, he signed a, and get this, 7-year deal at $6.5 million. Now, I don't have a problem with the money, $6.5 million is pretty good, but 7 years for Chris Kreider. He will turn 29 in April, so when this deal runs out, he will be 36 years old, and that's probably not a good thing. He's a good player, but with the way he plays, an aggressive hitting game, players like that usually don't last that long, so at the end of this term, he won't be effective at all, I think. Yeah, I don't know. It's good AAV, but it's bad term. Moving on to the Penguins, they made a few deals that made me turn my head. First, they got Patrick Marleau for a 3rd round pick in the 2021 draft, which turns into a 2nd round pick if the Pens win the cup, but this is a fun deal. It's probably too expensive for a 40-year-old, but I can't help but to feel good and happy for Marleau. One more shot at the cup with a team that has a really good chance of winning it. I say the Penguins are in the top 5 of the team that has a chance to win it, and why not get Marleau then? He's obviously not the most skilled guy anymore, but he brings this veteran side, which on the outside, for us, as just onlookers, can seem irrelevant, but for the guys in the room, it could mean a lot, and I just like this trade. The Pens also got Connor Sherry in a trade that saw Dominic Cahoon being traded to the Sabres for Connor Sherry, as I mentioned, and Evan Rodriguez. Now Rodriguez wanted out of Buffalo when he can probably find a role on the 4th line for the Penguins, but Connor Sherry, I remember his insane year 3 years ago when he was on pace for around 65 or 70 points playing with Crosby. Now we probably won't find that form again, but it'll be a good depth piece for the Penguins. Cahoon went to get away to Buffalo. I thought he was doing alright in Pittsburgh, so I was a bit shocked to see that he went, but it is what it is. The Sabres get a good player, I like Cahoon, and the Penguins get an old friend back and Evan Rodriguez. And I want to stay with the Sabres because they made the weirdest trade of the deadline, trading a 5th round pick for Wayne Simmons? I just don't know what to say. I would understand if the Sabres win their playoff position, this would be a good depth piece, and we saw rumors about Simmons to Vancouver and even talked about it in my Tyler Toffoli trade video, but to Buffalo? I guess it doesn't matter too much because he'll become a UFA in the summer, but what's the point? He won't get them into the playoffs, so what were they thinking here? They just give up a 5th round pick for Wayne Simmons because he can do something? I don't know, if I'm missing out on something here, you can tell me in the comments, but I just don't understand why they did this. Carolina were also very active yesterday, trading for 3 players, Vincent Trocheck, Sami Vatanen and Brady Shea, and naturally giving up a few pieces for that. So let's take a look at each trade. Vincent Trocheck to Carolina for Erik Haula, Lucas Wallmark, Chase Prisky and Eetu Luostarinen. Now Trocheck hasn't been incredible these past seasons. He had that 75-point campaign 3 seasons ago, and the reactions I'm getting from Panthers fans is that they seem pretty happy with him getting traded. But he can be a good 3rd line or 2nd line center for the Hurricanes behind Aho and Stahl, depending on what they do there, and his cap hit is alright as well. The Panthers get 2 good NHL players in Haula and Wallmark. Haula had that incredible season with Vegas a few years back, and they also get Chase Prisky. He seems to be doing alright in the AHL. I don't really know who he is, and the same goes with Eetu Luostarinen, and I'll be honest, I don't know what he can become. His stats seems to be okay in the AHL, so we'll see what happens with him. Moving on to the Vatanen trade, obviously Carolina gets Vatanen, and the Devils get prospect Janni Kukkonen, who has put up really good numbers in the AHL, and he could become a good player. Fredrik Claesson, who at this point in time seems to be an AHL defenseman, he has played a fair share of NHL games, so maybe he'll be a call-up at some point. And a 4th round pick that could turn into a 3rd rounder if Vatanen plays a set amount of games. I like this trade. Obviously Vatanen has struggled with injuries these past years and he could be a solid defenseman, and they obviously needed to try and fill the hole left by Dougie Hamilton and his injury, and while Vatanen isn't on his level, he can do for the season. And the last trade the Canes made was for Brady Shea, where they gave up a first round pick in 2020. And I'm not the biggest fan of Brady Shea, and giving up a first round pick for him is too much in my book. So the Rangers win this trade, and that contract on Shea is just yikes. But speaking of yikes, the biggest yikes of the deadline is definitely awarded to Julien Brisebois and his trade for Barclay Goodrow. If you missed this trade, then buckle up, because the Tampa Bay Lightning traded for Barclay Goodrow and gave up a first round pick for Barclay Goodrow. What are they smoking in Tampa? I was almost fine with them giving up a first rounder and foot for Blake Coleman. I like Coleman, but he was still on the more expensive side. But this is definitely the worst trade of the deadline. I won't make any further comments on this. A first rounder for Barclay Goodrow. San Jose fleeced Tampa. Anyways, moving on, Robyn Laner is headed to Vegas for Malcolm Subban, a second round pick, and prospect Slava Demin. I love Laner, and I'm really excited to see what he can do in Vegas, because Fleury hasn't been the best he can be this season, and for Vegas it's just good to have a backup that is good enough to be a starter, and that competition can be really good and healthy for them. Now I want to talk about some trades that didn't happen. I already mentioned the Parisi Ladd trade that didn't happen, but what I'm most upset and surprised about is that Thomas Tatar is staying in Montreal, because when you look at the deals that happened and the return, I mean, I already talked about Barclay Goodrow, but looking back at the past weeks, the Wild got a first rounder and a prospect for Jason Zucker, Devils got the same return for Blake Coleman, which I already mentioned as well. And I think Tatar is the best out of those players, so the return the Habs could have got for Tatar would have probably been really good picks and prospects, and maybe even a decent or good player. Now Tatar has one more year left on his deal, and maybe will be in this position next year again, where the Habs probably won't make the playoffs. I'm not saying they won't, but if they are, then they have to trade Tatar, because he's a good player and he could give you some really good pieces for the future. I was also real surprised to see that Tyson Berry is staying in Toronto. With him being on an expiring deal and not having the best of seasons, just like the Leafs, I thought Duet would go out and get something for him, but nope. And I don't know what the plan is for him now. Are they gonna trade him at the draft? If they do, the return will be next to nothing, because he'll be a UFA, and if they just let him go, they would have got nothing for him unless they somehow win the cup. But then they have to make the playoffs first, which they could very well miss out on. So I think Dubas really messed this up, and we'll see what happens, but he should have been dealt. But the Leafs did sign Jake Muzzin to a 4-year deal at $5.62 million, which is alright, but I think most Leafs fans will focus on the fact that Barry did not get traded. But that's it for my wrap-up video. There were obviously more trades I went down, but these were the ones I found most interesting. Let me know what you think about them in the comments below, and tell me if there were any other trades that caught your attention and what you think of them, and we can have a discussion in the comments below. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.